wish I could say yes, but no. We are, apparently solidarity works when in good times, but also in bad times. But of course the extent of the problem is not the same anywhere. Good evening, my name is Amana Ferro. I work for the European Anti-Poverty Network. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today and give some gender balance to this panel. I hope my presentation displays correctly because I see it struggling a little bit to fit on that screen. But anyway, whatever is not visible, I'll try to make up for in words. Next slide. Okay, so I'll just tell you very quickly what my organization is about, what we do. Then a few words about youth unemployment, but actually what is important for us is that the problem goes beyond just not having a job. It has to do with poverty and social exclusion of young people in the EU, and this is something, in the rush to talk about youth unemployment, this aspect is maybe a little bit overlooked when discussing about young people today. The part of overview on recent EU initiatives is going to be very quick because it was brilliantly covered already before me, but it gives a very good background to insist on the bits that I wanted to specifically highlight, especially around the youth employment package which came out in December last year. Then some suggestions, of course, from EAPN and what would be important elements for us in advancing youth well-being. And also, I was asked to present a good practice, and at the end of the presentation, I'll tell you a few words about a project implemented by some of our national members about youth empowerment, participation, and integration both into society and in the labour market. So about us, we're an independent European network of NGOs dedicated to the fight against poverty. We started back in 1990, so we've been around for, well, 22 years. We were a key actor in the before-mentioned open method of coordination, so this process of cooperation between governments and member states in the field of social policies, but also in the European employment strategy, which is a similar process regarding employment, started a bit later on in 1997 with the Treaty of Amsterdam. We work not just for, but with people experiencing poverty who are involved at every level of our network, since participation was mentioned before, and for the time being, we have financial support from the European Union. And now I'm showing up because that's a black screen. And I don't know how to read that. Okay, good. Unemployment. It is said that it's not surprising that in times of recession, young people are experiencing disproportionate unemployment levels because they say that young people usually have a hard time getting the job because of lack of experience, because of difficulty in finding suitable entry-level positions, because of a number of issues. So when everybody's getting fired or has difficulty entering the labour market, then young people would be in an even more difficult situation than the majority of the population. It is also another very serious issue, which was flagged up obviously by the Youth Forum because it's a main preoccupation for them, and for us, is the generalization of the use of youth labour as a cheap or even free substitute to paid labour. Because, you know, why should you hire a person and pay not just the wages but also social security contributions and the person's health insurance and the person's pension, etc., when you can just get some young person who's hungry for some experience on their CV who's going to do it for free, right? For 3 months or 6 or a year. How often has that happened everywhere? Another issue is the disappearance or the merging of entry-level jobs, what used to be called entry-level jobs, which is precisely when an employer opens a low-level, entry-level position and then takes a resource which the employer then retains and develops through training and through career progression to become part of the company of the institution. And that's gone now. Or it's merged to the point of being indistinguishable with low-paid or unpaid internships, to the point of, for instance, here in Brussels, if you look at job ads, you can see something that sounds very nicely like policy assistant. Anything. This is not an internship because it doesn't say that they're looking for a policy intern. Wrong. That's an unpaid internship. That's not an entry-level job anymore. Everything, a lot of things that are called junior this or assistant that are now internships, most of them unpaid, which promise excellent hands-on experience with the photocopier, When there are jobs, okay, so forget about internships, forget about entry-level jobs. Let's say that you do finally manage to get a job on the open labour market. It's very likely that that job is precarious. Why? Because precarious jobs start becoming the norm, not just for young people, but in general in so many labour markets across Europe. And as it was said, you know, what the crisis didn't kill, austerity measures are killing. There is an increased insecurity, the flexibility that Nikos was talking about on labour markets, which means that contracts are not precarious. They are part-time, irregular hours, short duration, with very little social protection, with little employment rights, and usually badly paid. So this is the kind of job you get if you do manage to get a job at all. And finally, another issue with internships, which we've seen, is that a lot of the time they're not recognized as work experience, meaning you've done 3 years of 6 months internships, and then an employer comes to you and say, oh, but you don't have any real work experience, right? These are just internships. You've never had a real job. So how is that supposed to act as a trampoline towards high-quality employment for young people? Slide, thank you. Okay, so what I was saying was that behind unemployment, there are other issues affecting young people today, which have to do with poverty and social exclusion. And this is not something that is very talked about, also because of a mental stereotype that even I had for a while, and I'm sure a lot of people have without realizing. When we say young people, we imagine, people on skateboards with iPads in jeans, going to parties. This is the image that we have. Poverty is not associated to young people. Youth has this kind of vibrant exuberance that people don't necessarily associate with poverty and hardship. And this is what leads to youth poverty being very often overlooked, although there are young people out there who are experiencing poverty and who are experiencing social exclusion. Because lack of opportunities for young people doesn't just condemn them to poverty, but also very often their families, because a lot of these young people cannot leave home, cannot find a place, cannot afford to get a place to stay on their own, are financially dependent on their parents, who might not be in a brilliant economic situation themselves, who are sometimes what we call the sandwich generation, caught between dependent children and dependent elderly parents or other relatives. So it's not good for anybody, and it's a generational issue that acts at all levels. The fact that there are no safety nets, such as minimum income, and Greece is one of the few countries in the European Union who does not have a minimum income scheme. Now, Professor Matsaganis was saying in Greece, when unemployment benefit runs out, you're out, because there's nothing else. There is no social assistance scheme of last resort. In the countries where there is minimum income, it's often inadequate to cover for basic living costs. There aren't enough services for young people, tailored services that would take into account user experience. There isn't enough outreach for these services that actually don't wait for young people to come to use these services, but go out to find pockets of deprivation and poverty and try and address them. The uncertainty about the future, which comes from not having a job, but also from all the other elements that I mentioned before, have implications such as inability to plan a future, inability to start a family, that has demographic implications. I'm sure everybody's heard how it's all our fault that some people are not getting their pensions right now, and there's definitely no pension in store for us by the time we get there, because we haven't had enough babies on the wonderful salaries we're all making in precarious jobs right now. And finally, and this is obviously obvious, erosion of self-esteem, bleak perspective. You start doubting your own capabilities, and you're wondering what point is there, because as we know, society is a wall, and they're just walls keep being put up to seem to keep young people away from decent jobs and from society. Moving to what the EU is doing about it. So you heard about Youth on the Move, which is an initiative of the Europe 2020, the great strategy that's going to make us all competitive. Or at least some of us. I'm sure it's going to make some of us very competitive. I don't know, some of us, some of them. So one of the initiatives of this strategy is the Youth on the Move, which supports active inclusion of young people, stands against precariousness, stands against low wages, which is very good, and has strong references to minimum income schemes. But it puts a lot of responsibility on young people, such as, it's your fault you're not skilled enough. It's your fault you don't move, I don't know, from Greece to Sweden, because, I mean, it's all Europe, right? It's a global village, surely. It's not a problem to move where the jobs are. And issues like that. There is little emphasis on job creation, and I'm sure there's something equally interesting under that black line, which I cannot read to you right now. The Youth Guarantee, which was introduced in 2011, is another initiative which is, in principle, very good, because, as Peter said, it holds governments accountable to offering young people the possibility to further their education or to get access to a job within 4 months. The original problem the EFN had with this was that it was not specified that it had to be a good job or high-quality education, because, and then it could have had the exact counter effect, it becoming a numbers game. So if you impose a youth guarantee, and if the government is forced to place young people somewhere, anywhere, in some job, in some education, just to meet the numbers at the end of the day, that's definitely not going to work. And it's definitely not going to solve the problem, it's going to create more problems in the long run. And the second aspect was, the guarantee speaks about placing young people in education or employment as if, for instance, for the poverty question, they have the same effect. A job can be a route out of poverty, education not necessarily, and in the absence of appropriate social protection, in the absence of minimum income schemes, you place young people in education, you do not solve their poverty and social exclusion problem. Not immediately, not while they're undergoing that education. The Quality Internship Charter, announced by Youth on the Move, supported by the Youth Forum, and I worked with the Youth Forum actually when it was drafted, and it was a very, very good experience, has very many positive points, such as decent remuneration, clear contractual obligations, working conditions, quality of the learning experience, because it has, I mean, let's face it, it is a learning experience. You're not supposed to go there to learn how to make coffee. I'm sure we all know how to do that. We have PhDs in coffee making. Anybody who's gone at least through high school has mastered the art of making coffee from 10th grade. But also employment rights, social security, anti-discrimination, and recognition. So these are all very important elements which are inside. The European concerns, which again you cannot see, is, for instance, the fact that explicitly this initiative of the European Commission is addressed to internships and not apprenticeships. And people may ask, what's the difference? Well, internships are usually associated with higher education, whereas apprenticeships are for young people who want to become carpenters or shoemakers or something like that. And this is another fallacy which I find, especially at the EU level, very often, which is that young people are considered to be young, urban, high-skilled, mobile individuals, whereas there are low-skilled youth, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is no job that one should feel ashamed in doing. There are youth in rural areas, equally. And I'm sorry, but internships is not going to help these people. A comprehensive initiative is needed also for these people, because for the time being, the answer is more skills. You only have 2 masters, shame on you, get back at a PhD and a postdoc. And then maybe we'll have a badly paid internship for you. The youth employment package, and I swear all this introduction was needed to get to here, because this package doesn't come from nowhere, and this is why what Peter told you before was very important, because it's all part of a process. Nothing comes from nothing, and it's a good package overall, and it derives from this Youth on the Move initiative of the Europe 2020. It has very positive elements about fighting precariousness. Finally, it seems that the European discourse is picking up on the fact that jobs are precarious, and precarious jobs are not good for anyone. They're not good for the economy, they're not good for enlarging the tax base for the state, and they're not good for people. It just doesn't work. They erode purchasing power, so you know. it has finally come to the attention of decision makers, at least at discourse level, that precarious jobs are not, as it was believed, a stepping stone towards better jobs, but very often they're just a revolving door where you get from unemployment, precarious jobs, unemployment, precarious jobs, and you're in a downward spiral of poverty, which just gets worse, because when you're in it, it's very hard to lift yourself up from it. It stresses the very important role of structural funds, and actually the role of EU funds and the potential for EU funds to assist member states in implementing this, all these initiatives targeted at young people to provide them support, is not stressed enough in a number of documents. And then the package contains some documents, some Commission documents specifically on the youth guarantee, which I detailed before, so I'm not going to go into that again, and also the quality framework for traineeships, actually they're called, which is now, Peter mentioned, in the second round of consultation by the social partners. So NGOs like us are obviously outside closed doors, because if you're not social partners, there's nothing you can say about employment. There are ways, however, and some of them are being picked up by documents, as I said before, and some of them European leaders are starting to acknowledge them, and that's good. Some of them not so much. For European, the most important thing is to look past employment and look at active inclusion more broadly. Active inclusion, I'll just explain very quickly, it's an initiative of the European Commission which has 3 elements. One is support towards quality employment, and yes, that's very important. The other one is adequate minimum income for everybody. And the third one is provision of quality, affordable services. Services, income, quality employment. These are the 3 pillars. They cannot operate separately. What you need is comprehensive, integrated strategies that work across the board and combine these 3 elements, because this is how you support a person. Employment alone is too narrow a focus to actually address the number of issues that you have out there. So comprehensive, supportive activation pathways, investment in job creation, because it's very easy to say go out there and get a job. Where are the jobs? Mentorship and job sharing schemes between older workers, younger workers. This was a very discussed topic during the previous year, which was the European Year for Solidarity Between Generations. 2 minutes. And, well, I had more on that slide, but I can't read it because it doesn't display. So I'm sorry, but I'm sure you'll be able to access my presentation later. But one of the points which I did have in there, which I do want to make, is exactly what Peter said before, which is youth participation. Nothing for youth without youth. Whatever solutions are out there, you must be part of them. It is wrong to say youth are part of the problem. You are part of the solution. I will not insist on this last slide, which is the good practice that I wanted to present, which is a project implemented in Austria, Hungary, Serbia and Croatia for the past 2 years. But I would just want to stress these very important elements. It's not just focused on employment, but on broader empowerment and support, including through services and income support for young people. It takes into account personal circumstances and needs and start from the individual and their specific circumstances, so all reactions are tailored and all responses are done with the individual together. And it uses participatory methods such as theater, such as all these informal methods that make it attractive to young people. So despite technical difficulties, I hope I managed to give you a bit of an overview of what we think about youth unemployment, youth poverty, and especially what steps forward we see as EAPN. Thank you very much for having me here again.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ την Αμάνα και σίγουρα είπε πολύ ενδιαφέροντα πράγματα να τα λάβουμε υπόψη, ότι δεν υπάρχει καμία λύση χωρίς τους νέους ανθρώπους μέσα. Αυτό είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό. Μιλήσαμε για την πολιτική για τους νέους με τη συμμετοχή των νέων. Να δούμε και πρωτοβουλίες από τους νέους. Ο Αντώνιο Λατζάρη, που είναι από την